The film opens with a girl named Audrey, the daughter of Dr. Mitchell Allen, who has passed away. In the previous part of this movie, there was an incident regarding the boogeyman, who is a demonic being. Dr. Mitchell passed away in that incident, and Audrey now lives alone with her dog, Layla. She looks at a picture of her father and gets very emotional, so she decides to read his diary, where he used to write about all the people who encountered the boogeyman. She gets engrossed reading the diary, and even takes it with her in the bathtub. While in there, she starts seeing a shadow, and eventually, a hand. But the figure instantly runs away once Audrey notices it. Frightened, she instantly gets out of the bath and heads to her bedroom. Just when she is about to sleep, her dog comes over with a ball. Layla wants to play with Audrey, so she takes the ball and throws it. Layla gets excited and goes into a dark closet while chasing the ball. Meanwhile, Audrey goes back to bed and closes her eyes, but then she hears Layla squeal. Concerned about the noise, she slowly gets up and builds the courage to approach the dark closet. Once there, she finds blood on the floor and gets terrified. Her hand is covered in blood, so she walks back in fear and shock. Then, something grabs her feet and drags her under the bed as she helplessly screams. The scene then changes to a university called Wolfbridge in Northern California. There, we see a student named Sarah Morris who is talking on a radio show. Sarah is also accompanied by a doctor named Roger Kane, who is the head of the psychological department of the university. The main focus of the show is to listen to other people's problems, and then try to help them out. Soon, a man named Eric calls them and explains that he is going through a traumatic breakup with his girlfriend. He claims that he has not made many friends since then, so he has no one to talk to about this, which is why he called. The scene changes and we see Sarah, who is listening to music when Dr. Kane comes. He notices that Sarah is making a playlist of music for Eric because of his breakup. Dr. Kane compliments her efforts, claiming that she will be a great psychiatrist one day. After this, Sarah goes out with her friends in the cafeteria. She tells her boyfriend that her father is completely fine with her going to his house for winter break. While they are talking, one of her friends named Lindsay asks about Audrey, the girl we saw at the start of the movie. Sarah mentions that she texted Audrey a couple of days ago, but she has not responded to her till now. Then, they start talking about how her father being a victim of the boogeyman is all over the news. They collectively decide that they should give her some time alone, since she must be grieving. At night, Lindsay enters the room that she shares with Sarah. She claims having heard the message from Sarah's father that he is expecting her to return home on the winter holiday. However, Sarah explains that she will somehow convince her dad to let her go to her boyfriend's house later. She adds that she cannot talk to her father now, because she needs to stay up and study. After hearing this, Lindsay takes her pillow and goes to her boyfriend's room, leaving Sarah to study. At night, Sarah is sleeping all alone in her room when Audrey walks in. Sarah wakes up and becomes immediately concerned. Audrey explains that the boogeyman is now after her too. She shivers in fear and exclaims that she sees him everywhere, fearing that after taking her father's life, he will come for her as well. Sarah tries to calm Audrey down and offers comforting words. She tells Audrey that she is more than welcome to sleep beside her. Audrey quickly agrees because she doesn't want to be alone. Later at night, Sarah gets up to get some water, and due to this Audrey also wakes up. When she asks, Sarah explains that she is going down the hall to get some water and encourages Audrey to go back to sleep. While Sarah is gone, Audrey tries to sleep, but the whole room turns black, and she starts seeing black shadows everywhere. The startled Audrey gets up and runs out of the room in search of Sarah. Petrified, Audrey keeps looking for Sarah until she finally sees a running tap, indicating that Sarah is there trying to get some water, but was somehow interrupted. Audrey intensifies as the door locks, and she once again comes face to face with the menacing boogeyman. She screams in sheer panic, convinced that this could be her last moment alive. Finally, Sarah enters the room, finding Audrey alone in the kitchen. Sarah observes Audrey's distress and tries to comfort her once more, explaining that there's no real danger and that she is likely traumatized because of her father's experience. However, Audrey can't shake the belief that the boogeyman is real. She bolts out of there, declaring the boogeyman's existence, and locks herself in her room. When Sarah attempts to talk to her again, Audrey pleads for solitude, insisting that she be left alone. Feeling helpless, Sarah decides to leave Audrey on her own. The next day, Sarah meets her boyfriend David and asks him to also look after Audrey. At night, Sarah is in the midst of her radio show when she gets a phone call, and she recognizes Audrey's voice on the other end. Sarah gets a sinking feeling that Audrey is about to discuss the terrifying boogeyman once again. As expected, Audrey begins to share her harrowing ordeal, claiming that the malevolent entity is relentlessly pursuing her, intent on ending her life, regardless of the precautions she takes. Her words also hint at thoughts of self. This causes Dr. Kane, who is also on the call, to spring into action. With an urgency born of concern, Dr. Kane immediately sends security personnel to Audrey's room to ensure her safety. Meanwhile, Sarah dashes into Audrey's location, maintaining the conversation on the phone to keep her distracted. Audrey confides in Sarah, revealing that she has delved into her father's journal, leading her to believe that she is destined to fall victim to the same fate, like the others who crossed paths with the boogeyman. It's at this moment that Audrey spots a movement in the closet, and cautiously approaches to investigate further. As she enters the closet, the door slams shut, and the boogeyman makes his malevolent presence known. Audrey finds herself in a nightmarish struggle, The boogeyman chokes her, lifting her off the ground. Dr. Kane, still on the call, listens in horror to the sinister events unfolding. Sarah, racing against time, finally bursts into the room, her eyes meeting the horrifying sight of the boogeyman throttling Audrey. Overwhelmed by shock and terror, Sarah unleashes an ear-piercing scream. Amidst Sarah's screams, one of her friends, Lucas, rushes to the scene. Sarah, in a state of shock, recounts the nightmarish events that transpired within the room. Trembling with fear, Lucas opens the door only to find the chilling sight of Sarah. The grim discovery leads everyone else to believe that she has taken. As the news spreads, Sarah takes another agonizing look at Audrey's lifeless body and breaks down in inconsolable despair. The police arrive, and Audrey's lifeless form is carefully taken away. Sarah is left devastated, overwhelmed by the horror that has unfolded. After some time, David, Sarah's boyfriend, arrives at the scene, rushing to her side and offering a comforting embrace. Later that night, Sarah and David find solace in each other's presence. Sarah begins to recount the haunting vision she experienced, describing a figure standing near her, strangling her. Uncertain if this is real or a figment of her imagination, David attempts to console her. He reminds her that she went through a traumatic event, and that it's entirely normal to have such distressing thoughts. Sarah also mentions the painful similarity to her mother's tragic passing, heightening the likelihood of her experiencing trauma and vivid imaginations. The following day, Sarah notices Audrey's roommate packing up her belongings. Concerned, she approaches her and notices Audrey's father's diary among the items. Aware that this diary contains entries about the boogeyman, Sarah's curiosity gets the better of her, and she quietly takes the diary with her. Later, Sarah gathers with her close-knit group of friends and begins to share her unsettling thoughts about the boogeyman. Despite her earnestness, none of her friends want to entertain the idea. Sarah, still grappling with the memory of what she witnessed, remains skeptical. She sheds light on a chilling detail from the diary. It mentions that the boogeyman targets those who believe in its existence, much like Audrey did. Tragically, everyone who held this belief met a grim fate. Even Audrey's own father had fallen prey to this sinister belief. Yet Sarah's friends remain unconvinced, leaving her feeling isolated in her apprehension. Disheartened, she retreats to her room. It's there that she receives a poignant message from her father, urging her to return home during the upcoming winter holiday. It is revealed that they haven't seen each other since her mother's funeral. Therefore, the flood of emotions becomes overwhelming, and tears stream down Sarah's face as she grapples with the weight of her emotions. Meanwhile, we see Lucas, who is engrossed in playing video games. An eerie noise suddenly catches his attention. Initially, he considers ignoring it and smokes a. As he exhales the smoke, he's jolted to see the visage of the boogeyman's face materialize within the smoky haze. Startled, he accidentally drops the bong, shattering it into pieces, scattering glass shards across the floor. Panicking, Lucas begins cleaning up the mess. But in a horrifying twist, the boogeyman appears from behind and forcefully pushes his face into the broken glass. Lucas's fate is grim, as he succumbs to this nightmarish encounter. Meanwhile, Sarah is sound asleep when unsettling noises emanate from her closet, sending shivers down her spine. In a moment of fear-driven curiosity, she foolishly decides to investigate the source of the disturbance and steps inside the closet. However, before she can react, the closet door slams shut, and when it finally opens, it leads directly into a corridor instead of her room. Sarah finds herself in a nightmarish scenario as blood starts pouring from the walls and ceilings around her. Bewildered and terrified, she starts running aimlessly, desperate for an escape. Eventually, she stumbles upon a room where she discovers Lucas, his face covered in blood and shards of glass. However, before Sarah can process the horrifying sight, the boogeyman seizes her from behind and drags her away into the unknown abyss of. Suddenly, Sarah finds herself back in her room, feeling more bewildered than ever. She rushes out into the hallway and is relieved to see that it appears normal once more. Seeking answers and comfort, she knocks on David's door and immediately shares her deep concern about Lucas's well-being. David, equally puzzled, bombards her with questions while Lindsay and her boyfriend, Jeremy, join the scene. Sarah conveys her fears to them, urging them to check on Lucas together. With a sense of urgency, they enter Lucas's room only to discover it empty, intensifying Sarah's worry. Her friends try to reassure her, suggesting that Lucas might have gone out and is perfectly fine. Meanwhile, Lindsay attempts to calm Sarah, assuring her that it is just a nightmare and that things will look different in the morning. Then, Lindsay decides to stay with Sarah for the night, and Jeremy supports this decision given the emotional turmoil Sarah is experiencing. Sarah settles back into her bed, with Lindsay by her side, who offers comforting words to Sarah. Meanwhile, Jeremy returns to the room he shares with Lucas. He notices that the video game is paused. When he tries to play the game, he inadvertently steps on a glass shard, injuring his foot. Perplexed about the source of the glass, he heads to the bathroom to tend to his wound. While washing his feet, he starts to hear unsettling noises and discovers more blood and glass shards in one of the bathroom stalls, deepening the mystery surrounding Lucas's disappearance. Jeremy's senses heighten as he notices someone passing by, and he instinctively follows the presence. To his astonishment, he finds Lucas, who appears to be completely unharmed and out of it. Jeremy keeps pursuing Lucas, and they both eventually reach their room. Upon entering, Jeremy is taken aback to find only a metal suitcase lying on the floor. He wonders where Lucas has gone, growing increasingly concerned. strange noises emanate from the suitcase, sparking Jeremy's curiosity. Despite his apprehension, he can't resist opening it to see what's inside. As he peers into the suitcase, his hands come into contact with something viscous, and he pulls them back, now stained with blood. Confusion and dread overwhelm him, and at that very moment, the boogeyman's menacing hands emerge from the suitcase's depths. They seize Jeremy, initiating a horrifying sequence of events. Every bone in Jeremy's body cracks as he is forcefully folded and pulled into the suitcase, his life tragically extinguished in an instant. The following day, Sarah and Lindsay wake up, but Sarah becomes increasingly concerned when she realizes that Jeremy hasn't called her as they had discussed. She had instructed him to call once he found Lucas, adding to her growing unease. Worried, she decides to check on them herself. Sarah knocks on their door but receives no response, prompting her to cautiously open the door and step inside. Upon entering, she observes that neither Jeremy nor Lucas are present in the room. Sarah calls Jeremy's phone, only to hear its ringtone emanating from the metal suitcase. She opens the suitcase and discovers it to be empty, leaving her perplexed and anxious. Amidst her concern, she's also thinking about her ongoing radio show and the unsettling events that have been plaguing her lately. Dr. Kane, noticing Sarah's distracted demeanor during the call, becomes concerned for her well-being and decides to have a private conversation with her. Outside, he gently talks to her about her recent experiences and tries to provide some clarity. Dr. Kane assures Sarah that the boogeyman is not real and suggests that her imagination has conjured this figure as a way to cope with her feelings of guilt over not being able to save her mother and best friend. He encourages her to accept that it's a manifestation of her inner turmoil. Sarah, pondering Dr. Kane's explanation, begins to consider that the boogeyman might indeed be a product of her own mind. She contemplates this possibility, hoping that by facing it, she can make the boogeyman vanish from her life. Later on, she decides to face her fear and get rid of the boogeyman once and for all. She goes to her closet and eventually stands inside it, hoping to see the boogeyman. She also closes the door so she can be completely alone and face him. She also turns off the lights, not expecting what would happen next. The boogeyman actually shows up and she starts to talk to herself, claiming that she is imagining all of it and that he is not real. However, her thoughts instantly change when he comes face to face with her. She tries to get away and eventually gets out of the closet, but the boogeyman has presumably transported her into a different realm, the same place where she saw all the blood on the walls before. This time, she sees an absolute massacre of all the students and gets extremely petrified. Moving forward, she also encounters Jeremy, but his entire body is deformed. He is in critical condition, begging to be saved. Unfortunately, there is nothing that Sarah can do now. Even though he does not want Sarah to leave, she tells him that she will go and find some help and will come back to him. As Sarah grapples with her disturbing thoughts, Jeremy's face begins to morph into that of the boogeyman itself. Terrified, she's forcibly pushed back into her room, and the shock jolts her awake, screaming. David, her ever-loyal boyfriend, rushes to her side and pulls her out from beneath the bed. Upon emerging, they both discover that Sarah's hands are indeed covered in blood. The blood is located specifically where Jeremy had touched her. This eerie realization shatters the notion that everything she's been witnessing is mere imagination, indicating that the boogeyman's presence may be all too real. David, though taken aback, still struggles to believe what Sarah is going through. In an attempt to comfort her, he leads her out into the hallways, showing her that there are no bodies or bloodstains inside. Nevertheless, Sarah remains perplexed. The horrors she's experienced seemed far too realistic to be dismissed as mere figments of her imagination. As they wander the hallways, they overhear some girls discussing the boogeyman, revealing that Sarah's radio show has spread awareness of the entity to others. It becomes evident that the boogeyman's presence has extended beyond Sarah's own experiences, adding an unsettling layer of reality to the situation. Returning to David's room, Sarah is filled with a sense of urgency as she points out the theory of Audrey's father. The more people talk about the boogeyman, the more real he becomes. Her observations about the upcoming winter break intensify her anxiety. She notices everyone preparing to leave, each with suitcases in tow. It's a stark reminder of the gruesome scenes she witnessed, and the implication that what she saw might come to pass tomorrow. David, genuinely worried for her, suggests that she should spend time with her father instead of accompanying him home. He wants her to be safe and away from the potential danger she believes awaits everyone. While they discuss this, David's friend, Ben, enters the room. Ben casually mentions his plan to install a camera in the women's washroom through the vents. Alarmed, Sarah vehemently opposes this idea, citing her previous experience of seeing blood dripping from the vents. However, both David and Ben dismiss her concerns, not taking her seriously. Frustrated and deeply troubled, Sarah decides to leave, feeling increasingly isolated by her growing fear. In the next scene, Sarah finds herself once more engrossed in the diary, stumbling upon an article that delves into the boogeyman. Meanwhile, Ben continues to crawl through the vents, obstinately ignoring Sarah's earlier warnings. Sarah is deep into her research at the library when Dr. Kane approaches her, bringing up the matter of her failing his class. He inquires if there is something more pressing she's involved in than his course. In response, Sarah shares the article she discovered in the diary, eager to discuss her findings. According to this article, the boogeyman's power increases as more people come to believe in it. Sarah is convinced that her radio show has inadvertently strengthened the boogeyman by spreading awareness of it throughout the community. Dr. Kane, however, endeavors to persuade her that none of it is real, contending that the article pertains to a long-forgotten legend. Despite his best efforts, Sarah remains steadfast in her belief that the boogeyman is genuine. At this juncture, Dr. Kane begins to harbor serious concerns about Sarah's mental state, fearing that she may have descended into a state of delusion amidst her harrowing experiences with the boogeyman. Meanwhile, Ben reaches the top of the girls' bathroom and he proceeds with the installation of his camera while surreptitiously observing the girls. However, his voyeuristic endeavor takes a chilling turn when he notices drops of blood falling. A terrifying realization dawns upon him as he gazes upward, only for the boogeyman to pounce upon him. Panicking, Ben attempts to crawl away, but he becomes ensnared in a fan that the boogeyman manipulates, ultimately claiming Ben's life. Back in her room with David, Sarah becomes increasingly distressed as she fervently discusses her belief that the boogeyman's legend is on the brink of resurgence, spelling doom for everyone in the dorm. Lindsay tries to gently reason with Sarah, expressing her belief that her claims are utterly absurd. Sarah hears the radio and decides to use it as a platform to warn everyone about the impending danger. She makes a dramatic announcement on the radio, urging everyone to evacuate immediately. Her alarm causes widespread concern, and camp security swiftly intervenes, apprehending her for making the announcement. Before being taken away, she implores David not to return to the hallway. In the laundry room, Lindsay notices something amiss with the machines. Then the washing machines begin bursting open, one by one, drenching the room in gallons of blood. The boogeyman emerges from the gruesome scene, ruthlessly claiming Lindsay's life and placing her in a washing machine. At the campus security station, Sarah is incarcerated, and Dr. Kane steps in to bail her out. He persists in trying to convince her that the horrors she's witnessed are products of her imagination, as no one else has seen the bodies she describes. However, Sarah remains resolute in her belief that these events are real and not coincidental. While Sarah and Dr. Kane engage in conversation, strange noises begin to permeate the room. Dr. Kane dismisses them as insignificant, and in an attempt to prove his point, he steps into another room. However, the door abruptly closes on its own, refusing to budge. Panic sets in as Sarah continues to scream, and the boogeyman seizes the opportunity, launching a horrifying attack on Dr. Kane and ultimately claiming his life. Terrified and traumatized, Sarah rushes outside, her desperation driving her to call David. She explains that she finally comprehends what's happening. The boogeyman manipulated her into witnessing the gruesome murders, hoping she would spread the word about his existence. David, engrossed in the journal, now believes her, but he remains inside the dorm. Sarah hurries to her room, where she finds David fixated on a dark closet. As he turns around, the boogeyman seizes him and drags him away, leaving blood splattered on Sarah's face. Before she can process this horrifying sight, David's lifeless body is thrown back into the room, landing on the bed. Overwhelmed with rage and agony, Sarah screams, desperately wanting an end to the nightmare. The police and other students suddenly arrive, discovering David's lifeless body. Shock sweeps through the crowd, and students urge Sarah to inform the authorities about the boogeyman. However, Sarah realizes that spreading the boogeyman's name further will only make him stronger. In a chilling turn of events, she claims responsibility for all the murders, painting herself as a borderline psycho who derives pleasure from taking lives. The students are left stunned as the police handcuff Sarah and take her away. Every gaze in the room fixates on her, capturing the haunting image of Sarah covered in blood as she is led off by law enforcement, leaving behind a trail of uncertainty. As the cops escort Sarah down the elevator, one of them expresses doubt, suggesting that Sarah may not be capable of taking lives and that something is amiss. Sarah, however, remains resolute and prepared to sacrifice herself for the greater good. She insists that she is responsible for all the bodies they found, and implores the cops to arrest her and lock her away. Her only aim is to ensure that no one talks about the boogeyman anymore. A somber silence pervades the elevator as they descend, but suddenly, it comes to a halt, leaving them trapped. Panic ensues as they realize they are trapped. In this moment of vulnerability, the boogeyman materializes and seizes Sarah, rendering the helpless cops powerless to intervene. The elevator doors close with the sinister entity, Sarah, and her unwavering resolve inside. The scene shifts to a new setting, where two different girls are seen sleeping in the same room, previously occupied by Sarah and Lindsay. One of them gets dressed and heads out, while the other initially jests about the boogeyman. However, their light-hearted banter takes a chilling turn when the boogeyman makes his presence known, abruptly snatching away the unsuspecting girl. The boogeyman continues to inflict to anyone who dare believe his existence.